Kohoutek. What do people think the first time they see my artwork? Well, I hope they enjoy it, feel that they have the opportunity to see an narrative artist and tell stories, and hopefully they can kind of relate to those stories. And every time they look at a piece and they look at it a second time, they can see different images in there that they had not seen before. All my narratives are basically about myself, maybe my trips I do, and that's the kind of narratives that I do. Well, we like to travel. I travel with my wife. We travel all over the place. This last year we went to Spain. The year before we went to Germany. So since we're both retired, we try to take a trip abroad about every year, and then we usually take 2 or 3 in the United States every year. What's the tools of my trade on a trip? I usually buy postcards or take photographs on my iPad. I do not do sketching. Even when I do any of these pieces, I never sketch them before I do them. A lot of times I don't even have an idea of what I'm going to do. I just start with maybe an image, and then something will come to me, or I'll start with a figure and then tell a story around that figure and just slowly build on that. And there'll be times where I'll stop for a while and just kind of think about what I'm doing. And even when I think I'm done with a piece, I usually set it back for maybe about anywhere from 3 to a week, just to see if there's something I want to add to it, because once it's on these tiles or the pottery, it's really hard to take it off. I grew up in Great Falls, went to public school in Great Falls. My first art class was in junior high, which I call middle school now. Then I went to CMR, never took an art class until my senior year, and somebody said, "Man, it's an easy credit. Why don't you take this art class?" So I thought, okay, I'll take this art class. And as I found out, it wasn't an easy credit. It was way harder than I thought. And so I was having some problems in it. I went to my teacher and said, you know, I'm not really into doing landscapes, still lifes. Is there another option for me to do? And she said, well, we have a ceramics, a couple potter's wheel, and would you like to do that? And I said, yeah, because I did like one class in middle school and did that. Then after high school, and I did a lot of theater in high school too. I liked theater. It was enjoyable, and I liked being around creative people. And so I was going to Bozeman, Montana State University, and I was going to start in the theater department. And so I started with that, and I was in a small play, and you know, people would say, "No, that was really good, really good." And then when you'd walk off, they were just backstabbing you. And I thought, oh, I can't deal with this. I'm not going to do this. So my second choice was always ceramics. So I went to Bozeman, went to the art department, and there was 2 professors there. One, his name was Rick Pope, the other one, Michael Pede. Rick Pope came from a background very strict, throwing on a potter's wheel. Michael Pede came from a background where he went to school in California and came from a background of funk and pop ceramics. So I basically had the 2 best worlds, you know. So I could throw with one guy, and the other one was more of maybe a sculpturist, ceramist, conceptual, kind of thinking about things in a different way. So that worked really good. I was more interested in a BFA, a Bachelor of Fine Arts, in ceramics. And so at the second year, I met the other professor, Michael Pede, and it kind of changed me, is like thinking of ceramics as different than just pottery. You know, prior to that, in the 60s, ceramics was really, it was a non-sculpture form. It was people throwing ceramics, cups, plates, doing China paint on them, not seeing them as sculpture, and other options. And then there was two people, and both of them were from Montana. One's name was Peter Volkas. He lived in Bozeman. The other's name was Rudy Audio, and he lived in Missoula, Montana. So both these artists came to, and I don't think they considered themselves artists at that time. They were in the Korean War. They were on a GI Bill. They both came to Bozeman to take art classes. There was a woman there named Francesca who kind of let them have the run of the ceramics department. And so those two guys started to do more than just regular ceramics. They would throw platters and would draw on them, cut them up, make pots and cut them up, add to it, do different techniques with glazes, and Rudy Audio painted kind of motif kind of drawings on them, bright colors, and up until that time, that just wasn't done in the ceramic world. And it was probably done in some areas, but not on the level that they were doing it. So they both went on to become very well-known ceramic artists. They were probably the fathers of contemporary ceramics. So there was a very big connection to Bozeman in that background. After that, I went to, I taught in Montana for 1 year because my parents said, look, we know you want to be an artist, but how are you going to make a living? And, they said you should take education, and at that time you couldn't minor in art and you couldn't minor in education. So I had to get basically a double major, K through 12 in education and then in ceramics. So I got a job in Montana in oil boom town, and I did not like it at all. Didn't like it at all. So I did that for a year, and I said, okay, I can save up enough money. I'm going to go to graduate school. I called Michael Pete up, who we became friends, still are very good friends, and he said there's a catalog out there that come by my house, I'll give it to you, and it tells you how much every university gives out in the United States, and what their curriculum is, who teaches there, and things like that. I really wasn't interested in, and a lot of people went to a certain graduate school to learn a certain technique from that professor. I was not interested in that. I wanted to go to a university that had good facilities and gave me a lot of money to go to school. I applied at 4 different colleges, and I got accepted into all 4 of them. And so 2 of them I didn't want to go to. One of them I did want to go to, and it was Louisiana State University. They had a good program, and I kind of wanted to go to a bigger city, growing up in Great Falls, Montana. So I picked LSU. So I was driving to LSU, and my parents called me. I was staying at my aunt and uncle's house in Des Moines, Iowa. It was about halfway. And my parents called me up and said, we got this letter from this other university, Southern Illinois. And I said, well, how's that look? They said, they'll give you $150 more than LSU. And so I said, and LSU started like 3 weeks after Southern Illinois did. So I thought, well, I'll go to Southern Illinois, and if I don't like it, I'll just keep going down the road and go to LSU. And so I went to Southern Illinois. That's probably not a great way to think about going to graduate school, but that's what I was thinking. It was like in the 70s, you kind of wanted to get around, go to a bigger city. So they said $100, and I thought, well, for 3 weeks, I can rent something for 3 weeks, a month, and if I don't like it, I'll just go. Well, I liked it, and it was a good facility. At that time, the ceramics department, or a lot of them, it's not what they are today. They don't mind you stepping outside that box. Back when I went to school, you got a degree in ceramics, and you did ceramics. That's what you did. But so I met this woman, and she did these incredible sculptures, insulation, and I just thought, man, this is outside the box. And I thought, I want to go outside that box. And so I started to do sculptural stuff. the two ceramics teachers said, well, you can't do that. You gotta, And I thought, well, I got one more year left. It was a 3-year program. I got one more year left, and you have to write. You have to. First semester you take classes. Second you write a thesis. Thesis was really influences and about your work. So I didn't want to do that. They came and said, you got to make a decision. We don't want you hanging around these two people. They're not good for your career. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. So I went to the sculpture department and I said, look at it, I got 1 year left, basically 1 semester left. Can I transfer into the sculpture department? And he said, yeah, no problem. So I had spent 2.5 years in ceramics thinking I was going to get an MFA in ceramics, a Master of Fine Arts in ceramics. Well, that didn't work out, So I transferred into the sculpture department, and that kind of left not great with the ceramics department, but it was what I wanted to do. I had always liked this movie called The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster, and it was an old movie, and he was an actor, a director, was married to an actress, and at one time was very well known, and then lost that status, kind of faded. His wife died, and his lived in Hollywood, and his house kind of got decrepit, but he still swam. So I wanted to do a series on this movie, at least in my mind. People look at the swimmers, and I'm sure they don't get that concept out of it. But for me, this is what the concept I wanted to do. I wanted to have a swimmer in there, and I wanted to have different kinds of images that I liked or were important to me. And some could be more contemporary, some old ones, like a pencil sharpener that I use every day. Swiss Army knife that I still have one on my keychain that I have my whole life. Indian nickel for good luck. And I could go on and on about different images. Some have instruments. I'm a huge jazz person. Other music I enjoy listening to. So different images that I wanted to do on this. So then I drew the images that I wanted on there, and had some decals made of the figures that I like to draw. They're childlike, naive, primitive, all that have influenced me on my artwork, and so that's why they're childlike figures in it. And I also wanted to do a series of cups with figures that have decal that I had made. So I went to, once again, I could throw the cups that I wanted to, and you got to know what you're doing, because they say the clay shrinks, and you got to know it shrinks a third. So your average cup, you're going to have to throw it a third bigger. So I threw 3 different shapes of cups that I wanted, went to a guy that makes the molds. He makes a mold. Then you take the mold to another guy that pours some liquid clay into it, and he trims it. And he did like 96 cups for me in 2 days. What inspires me to create my work? I would have to say my surroundings, my daily activities, things I do with friends, things I do with my wife, my son, things in my background. I have a piece that has a big Piggly Wiggly on it. My grandfather sold flour to all the Piggly Wiggly stores in that, and I always love that. And we would go to a bar in North Dakota, and he would say, okay, now when you come home, tell your grandma that you went to Piggly Wiggly. Well, he would go to this bar, and they would play pinochle for like a penny. and we would sit up there and have like a Roy Rogers, and I'll never forget that. You know, so there's images that I just don't forget as a child, and images that I see now. I try to put in like a piece of contemporary art. I have a piece that we went to South Africa, and so I have some South African masks in them. So just everyday activity. I try to put my figures in there with, like if I could do contemporary Chinese artwork, that's what it is. I try to put like a silo in there, or some farm trucks, because I think those images in Montana growing up are very interesting shapes. You don't think about them because you see them so much and you just drive right by them. So after I did these flat pieces, I decided, you know, I'm kind of getting bored. And maybe bored isn't the right word, but I thought, you know, I'm gonna do some throwing again. And I'm gonna connect these shapes, and I'm gonna start off doing black and white. So I got back in throwing, and throwing's like riding a bike. Once you do it for as long as a person does it, you don't forget how to do it. And I've always liked the covered jar and the teapot concept. So I started off doing black and white covered jars and painting on them, and just seeing if I could get the same effect I wanted using colors and just using black and white. And I felt I really did. I liked them. The pattern started to work really good with me. Do the same thing, tell a story with it. Well, after I did the color ones, I thought, geez, my next thing is do colored ones, you know. And so I did some color ones. And then after that, and incorporated black and white. Then after that, it's like, well, why not put decals on them? Same thing, telling stories, and just from images from childhood to family vacations, you know, I mean, things, when you have 4 siblings, there's always something happening. I mean, there's always something that happens, you know. And so that's where the majority of my images and narrative things come from. Okay, tell you about the round pots. I did a series of round pots mainly because these pieces I do take a long time. They can take anywhere from 2 months to longer. The covered jars, same thing or longer. By the time I throw them, connect them, fire them, draw on them, paint on them, decal, it takes that long to do one of these pieces. So I thought, you know, I would like to do some really quick cover jars. Ones that I could throw in like 45 minutes, and then throw the lids, and then let them dry, bisque them, and then I would have these small cover jars that I could draw in and be done like in 4 days. And so I did a series of covered jars for that reason. And I didn't want to put images or things from my background. I just wanted to put my friends' heads on them and do a piece of my decals I had made of my figures, and some using Chinese decals as like a piece of artwork. So I did a series of small cover jars. Why did I want my work at this museum? I like the size of it. I've always liked Paris Gibson Square. We try to make almost all the shows here. When my wife started here, me and her started the ceramics program downstairs. So it's always had a very important place in both our lives. It's the only contemporary museum in Great Falls. There's no contemporary galleries here. So I've always thought that this would be a very good place to show my work. This body of work I had worked on for like 8 years. So it took me that long to do that. And then Nicole asked me, I had said something, I said, you know, I got a body of work that I would like to have a show at the square, and just to, you know, have people in Great Falls come and see something different. I mean, you're not going to see this work anyplace else. You know, you don't see people that are, you know, copying me, or the images, or the storytelling, or, you know, my concepts of what I think art is, or art is what to me, and I enjoy either all kinds of art. I just don't like art that is like what I do. A lot of times I like work that is way different than mine, because it makes me think more about art. And sometimes, you know, people will say, well, anybody can do this. Well, anybody can't, or everybody would. And it takes a person to think outside that box and come into the square. I've seen a lot of shows that I might not understand, but it makes me think about it. And if it makes you think about it, it's not a bad thing in my eyes. It's a good thing that it makes you think about different kinds of art. To youth in Great Falls, what advice would I give them? Well, I think one thing is you should always go after your dream. A lot of times it's not going to work out. A lot of times you have to have like a backup plan. And some people say that's not a good thing, but it's tough out there. It's tough being an artist. It's tough being in the arts, period. It's tough being in ballet, dance, theater. It's tough out there. It's like being a professional sports. It's probably 2% that make it, you know, and everybody else I know that is an artist, you got to have another job. You know, you're a waiter, a waitress. It's a tough go to make a living at. So if you want to do that, you got to, you know, think about maybe a backup plan, or just never give up and just realize, you know, I may be living in this dumpy apartment, but I'm doing what I want to do, and maybe I'll get a break, and maybe not. And so that's tough. And I think it's the same with, you know, wanting to be a doctor, you know, wanting to be a lawyer, you know, follow your dream. And another thing I know I preach is you got to study what you want to do. I mean, the bottom line is, you know, yeah, even if you're going to be a lawyer and you study halfway, you're not going to be a good lawyer. And it's the same in the arts. If you want to be good, you got to put the time into it. Yeah, and sometimes it's a thin and narrow to do it, you know, and it's hard for kids to stay within that focus of what they want to do, because there's a lot of things out there that are not good influence, and it's tough to make those calls, and it's even tougher now than when I was growing up. I mean, we didn't have internet, Wi-Fi, cell phones, Google. I mean, you know, you didn't have that stuff. I mean, when I was growing up, when it got light out, your parents said, go outside and play. Well, now you sit in front of your computer, so, which is fine, you know, that's good. But I think if you're gonna do something to get out in the world, and that's gonna help you become a better person.